Hi everybody and welcome to Heel Heat. My name is George Coles, and on this episode, we're going to review Billy Corgan's Adventures in Carnyland. Now what this is, if you're not familiar, is a reality show following Billy Corgan's life, mostly centered on the NWA, the National Wrestling Alliance, which he is the owner of currently. There's some tie-ins with his personal life. During the show, he's arranging for a wedding to his beautiful wife, Chloe. There's a little bit with his band, which if you're not familiar with him, he is the lead singer of the band Smashing Pumpkins, which is one of the most successful rock bands of the last 3 decades, probably of all time. They've sold millions and millions of albums. You've most likely heard songs of theirs, whether it be Bullet with Butterfly Wings, Today, 1979, or any of their numerous hits. And I wanted to cover this because I'm a fan of both his musical outings and the NWA, as you can see by the NWA shirt I'm wearing. I wanted to watch this. I'm not normally someone that likes reality television. Some of it is watchable, some of it is bad. I kind of wanted to look at this kind of like a Total Divas type show and see where it compares, see what I like about it, what I don't like about it, where I think they did good, where I think they could improve. This is something that you could find on the CW app, which we'll get into that at the end when I talk about the full review of this and my problems with that. For this, I'm going to go episode by episode for review. Each episode I'm going to review individually, and then I'm going to review the show or the season all in once. If you haven't seen my shows before, I do review everything on a 1 to 5 scale, 1 being the worst, 5 being the best. We start off with the first show, which is called Corgan's World, which is obvious by the name. We get introduced to the main players, Billy Corgan, who takes over the narrator role and is basically the central character of this show. We meet Pat Kenny, who you may know as Simon Diamond. He works behind the scenes. We're introduced to Joe Galley and Kyle Davis, the 2 announcers for the NWA, the ring announcer and the lead commentary, and they're also tasked with selling tickets, which is kind of the one story we get out of this main show here, is the ticket sale issues. We get introduced to Jazz, who seems to be over the women's division and is an agent along with Pat Kenny. And we're also introduced to, I guess we could say, kind of the semi-heel of the show, although I think when I look back at it, Kyle Davis is more of the heel than Brian Idol, which is who we're introduced to, Brian Idol. And I think we're supposed to have a power play between these two. Full disclosure, Brian Idol is someone that I worked with in the past on a podcast I used to work on called Live from the Armory. He was a guest on our show, I believe a couple different times. He's someone that we've talked to. Really nice guy, really open and giving with his time. So I do have a little bit of a bias towards him, but you'll see what I'm saying when I say I feel like they set up Brian Idol to be the heel, but it kind of flips through the show. This opening show is more of a setup, kind of introducing us to the characters. We get introduced to the idea that Corgan is about to get married, and we meet his bride-to-be, Chloe Mendel, who, absolutely beautiful woman. They run a plant-based tea house in Highland Park, Illinois, a suburb of Chicago, together, which is called Madame Zuzu's, which also serves as a concert venue or a venue, I guess, of some sort, because during the season, we'll talk about it when we get there, we see shows that are done there, we see a wrestling event that's handled there, but I digress. Like I said, this is more of a setup, letting us know where we're going with the season. Overall, it was a good one, but there's not much happening here. I'm giving this episode a 3. Now we roll into episode 2, which is called the Crockett Cup, and we start to get a little bit more of the wrestling side. This is heavily on the wrestling side. We get little bios with Knox and Trevor Murdoch explaining who they are. Blunt Force Trauma, which is my favorite team in the NWA right now. They're managed by Aaron Stevens, who you may remember as Damian Sandow if you're not someone that's been following along with the NWA. We get introduced to the ongoing feud with Natalia Markova and Camille, who Camille is a world champion. We start to see some of the issues that Billy is having with Joe Galley and Kyle Davis, with them not selling a lot of tickets for the Crockett Cup. They're being given the responsibility of promoting the show, and they don't seem to be doing a great job. The turnout is not anywhere as good as you would like to have it be. And with where the Crockett Cup was, this was from 2023, that's a hotbed for independent wrestling. This shouldn't be a place that you have trouble selling tickets. I've worked with the same podcast and talked to many promoters and many wrestlers that base themselves out of that same area, and they run shows that probably had more attendees than this show did. You gotta remember, this is the hotbed for Jim Crockett Promotions. This is historically a big area for professional wrestling. The Winston-Salem, North Carolina area, Charlotte, all that area has such a fan base, whether it be old fans, new fans. There's a huge fan base you could draw from. So to have trouble drawing there is kind of telling towards what your show is. So I could see where he would have some of the issues he's having. This is mostly all about the Crockett Cup, which Knox and Murdoch eventually win. I did enjoy this episode. I thought it was a little bit better than the first because we got a little more in depth with our subjects. I'm giving this one a 4. Now the next episode, episode 3, is HP Cares for Cooper, which the HP stands for Highland Park. This is based on a charity show that Billy Corgan decided to run for a young kid named Cooper who was a victim of a mass shooting in the Highland Park area. He was shot in his back and is paralyzed, which prayers out to the young kid. And he wanted to do a fundraiser for that family and give them a night of happiness, so he put on an NWA show to do so. This is really where the heart of the show comes in, and I kind of feel like this might have been something they should have done a little bit later once they fully explained some of the characters, but it's probably going chronologically as the things happen, so it makes sense there. Not only do we see Cooper and his family, and we're told their story, and that's heartbreaking for anyone that has a heart. You know, a little kid getting shot, that's probably one of the worst things that can happen. During this episode, we get a bigger in-depth look at Kenzie and Kylie Page, two of the most successful women on the NWA roster. We get a bit of an idea of what their life's like, that they're second-generation wrestlers. Their father was a wrestler that never really made it big, and he kind of has misgivings about them potentially being in the wrestling world. We get to see where Chloe gets a little bit upset with Kyle, and Kyle Davis and Chloe Mandel. From here out, I'm going to call them by their first name probably, because as we keep going, we get to know the characters. Kyle comes off as sophomore, kind of standoffish, a little bit of a entitled kind of character, and you start to see a little bit of that here, and you start to see the cracks in that, which I thought this was going to be the thread for the whole show, was the evolution of either Kyle learning and becoming better or getting replaced. But anyway, you start to see some of that friction here. Chloe is very upset because she's having to do a lot of the stuff that is supposed to be on Kyle's plate. This is a very good show. A very heartwarming yet also sad show, because the reality is there is way too much gun violence, and way too much gun violence that involves children in our country. And I'm not going to pretend like I have the answers, and I'm not going to pretend like I know the results. I just wish there was something that could be done to stop all this senseless violence against children. Again, I don't know the answers. I don't know the route to that. I'm just someone that has a heart and cares and wishes to see children have an opportunity to grow up and be normal children and live their lives. I thought this was a really, really good episode. Really my favorite episode of the show as far as a reality TV show episode. This really hit home. We really get to see Chloe and Billy and how they are as people. I'm going to give this episode a 5. I thought this was excellent. Next up, we go to episode number 4, which is called West Palm Beach. Billy has an idea to bring the NWA on tour with him with the Smashing Pumpkins, and this is for a show at West Palm Beach. We get to see a little bit more of the issues with Kyle. Kyle is being a little standoffish about putting up the ring in the rain. Again, comes off as a little bit of an entitled jerk in here. We get to see more of the interaction with the Smashing Pumpkins and how the tour goes, and how they thought this might be a good idea to maybe put the NWA in front of Smashing Pumpkins fans that don't know the NWA that much, which obviously it's a bigger fan base. Like I said earlier in this video, Smashing Pumpkins is one of the biggest bands in rock music. They have a caveat. They're going to sell 10 to 15,000 tickets everywhere they go. I mean, they're an iconic band. They've been on The Simpsons. That's how iconic of a band they are. This is a nice trials and tribulations type show. Things that could have happened, things that happened, the little nuances of being on tour. We get to see a little bit of the frustrations. Kind of felt like this episode and episode 5 could have been condensed into one thing. And when I get to the end, I'll talk about how I think they condensed a lot of this too much. In this case, I think they could have condensed both of these episodes into one. I thought this was a really good episode. I'm not saying that it was bad. I just feel like this and the next one felt a lot of the same. I'm giving this episode a 4. It was enjoyable. Next up, episode 5. It's called Tampa. Obviously, they've gone from West Palm Beach to Tampa for the next stop on the tour. We get a little bit more of the Kyle versus Brian Idol, which seems to be an ongoing thread. Brian Idol seems to think if Billy Corgan gives him the opportunity, he'd be better at selling tickets and promoting the show. The story with that is everybody else in the office doesn't seem to like Brian Idol, whether that be Kyle Davis and Joe Galley or some of the other people backstage, which they don't really get into much other than the Kyle Davis and Joe Galley disliking him. Joe and Kyle seem to be on the same page. They both do agree that they may be underqualified for promotion, and they kind of question this because Brian Idol helped to promote the show, but it's in his home area, so they wonder what can he do going out of that area. Again, a little bit more of what I thought the show was as an underlying storyline. We see Idol, Natalia Markova, and Ruthie J. They get to join Billy Corgan on stage for their show with the Smashing Pumpkins, which they're in a video. I don't think I've seen the video, and honestly, I don't know how many new music videos I've seen in the last decade. I've heard new music of theirs. I hear it on Spotify. I don't go out of my way to look for videos. It's not like the time of MTV where you would turn on MTV and wait for the new Smashing Pumpkins video or whatever band you want to see. So while I do know that there are still music videos, I couldn't honestly tell you the last one I've actually watched. I paid attention to most of the Smashing Pumpkins releases. I've listened to their music. Some of their stuff I like, some of their stuff I don't. It's a lot like every other band. But apparently, at some point, Brian Idol and Markova were in a video, which is why they come out for the song. This is really touching. Anytime that they start with the family interaction with Chloe, Billy and Chloe's kids, Billy Corgan, the band interaction, you really feel the heart and soul of Billy Corgan. And Billy Corgan was always a person that I felt kind of had a pompous, standoffish attitude. He came off as being pretentious in interviews. He comes off a little standoffish, and that may just be he's a little bit shy. But here, when you see him and you see the way he talks and the way he acts and the way he is in real life, he comes off like such a better person. He comes off like an enjoyable human, someone that has joy. A lot of times when you watch a Smashing Pumpkins interview, he seems very miserable, and up until this point, that's pretty much the only interviews I've seen of him. I've seen a couple interviews where he talked about wrestling, where he's on full-on promoter mode, which are no different than any video you've seen from any regular wrestling promoter. They're promoting their show, talking about their people, so you can't really judge someone by that. I got more from these 8 episodes of watching this than I have from knowing Smashing Pumpkins as a band for 30 plus years now. I forget when Gish came out. I think it was like 91 or 92. Somewhere in that area. But I've known of them since the era of Gish. They were right in the wheelhouse of music I was listening to at the time. Very much like Sonic Youth, very much like what would be known as the grunge sound, the alternative sound. And Gish is a very good album. It's still my favorite of the Smashing Pumpkin albums. A lot of people point to Melancholy and Infinite Sadness or Siamese Dream, which are both great albums, don't get me wrong. For me, it's Gish. I like the sound of Gish, which there's also an excellent video. This is one of the things that I've seen Billy Corgan, and I know I'm going off on a tangent, that I've seen him outside of the band, and it was him getting back the guitar that he used when he made Gish, which had been stolen from him, and he finally got it back 20 plus years later. That's a really cool video to watch. But anyway, I digress. Back to the show. Like I said, I enjoy this. The interaction with the bandmates, with him, with the family, it makes you appreciate Billy Corgan much more. I'm giving this one a 4. Next up, episode 6, the NWA 75th Anniversary Part 1. This is focused on day 1 of the 75th anniversary. Again, we have a lot of talk about the tickets. The ticket sales seem to be a little bit better, but this is a big show. The NWA 75th Anniversary or anniversary shows every year seem to get their biggest traction. When I'm looking at Twitter or just in general internet wrestling communities, the NWA anniversaries seem to get a lot more eyes than other NWA shows do. This again is another one that focused a lot on the wrestlers. We see Tom Latimer and Camille, and they talk about their marriage and a little bit more into them, which is cool. We get a very short snippet of Maxie Impaler and Father James Mitchell, which I kind of wish they dove into more, because it does go into here Billy talking about being inclusive and liking a person for who they are and being open to anyone, which we'll see a little bit later on the other end of the spectrum. We talk about the Brothers of Construction here and Violent J being involved. And there's a neat little thing where he talks about the absurdity, Billy Corgan talks about the absurdity of pro wrestling and having Violent J from the Insane Clown Posse texting Billy Corgan of the Smashing Pumpkins about what he can do in a pro wrestling ring and then just doing what he wants to do anyway. Kind of neat there. We get more of the Markova and Camille feud is out here. We see Kenzie Page, who we were introduced to a few episodes back. She wins a battle royal to become a number 1 contender for Camille's World Championship, which is going to happen the next night. I thought this was a really good show. We start to see a little bit of frustration from Camille, both on her end. She believes that she's not being booked properly, even though she's one of the strongest booked wrestlers in the history of Billy Corgan owning the NWA. Probably her and Nick Aldis are the two most strongly pushed wrestlers they've had. She also talks about her husband, Tom Latimer, not getting the push that he needs. I like Tom Latimer. I think he's a good wrestler. I think part of that is he has a lot of skeletons in his closet, and I'm not saying that should disqualify him from getting a good push. I think a lot of it has to do with, I don't know how much he connects as a bigger star than where he is. He's not on the level of someone like I just mentioned, Nick Aldis, where he's a very good person that you could send out to all the interviews and they're going to come off properly. And I'm not saying that everybody that's ever been a main eventer in Billy Corgan's version of the NWA comes off like that, but I don't think he fits the description. Overall, this is my favorite of the wrestling-based episodes, and probably my second favorite behind the HP Cares for Cooper episode. I'm giving this episode a 5 too. I thought it was excellent. The next episode, episode 7, NWA 75th Anniversary Part 2, which we go into night 2 of the 75th anniversary. We see Kenzie Page become the champion. There's a lot of discussion that ends the first half of this and begins the second half of this, where Camille doesn't want to do the finish that Billy Corgan's given her. Corgan toes the line in this whole series with staying in kayfabe, and then there's times when it comes to the outcome of the matches where he breaks kayfabe a bit, where he says, I've decided this person's going to win. And this one here, he shows some remorse for going with what Camille wanted to do. Camille didn't want to lose cleanly, and Camille was questioning whether she wanted to stay in the NWA or not. I think Camille's a hell of a talent. I'm not going to pretend like every wrestler in the world doesn't have this same kind of attitude. A lot of people say that's what it takes to get you to the top. I like that they put that here, that they kept that in, that there was some tension. We also got, much like I said with Maxie Impaler in the last episode, we get a bit of an interview with Tyrus. Now, Tyrus you may know as Brodus Clay if you haven't been following along with the NWA. Tyrus also is a pundit on Fox News. He's very right-wing Republican. Now with that, when he was NWA champion, he got a lot of backlash because of that. And to Billy Corgan's credit, he said, we accept everybody here. Tyrus is a good person. He's helped me out immensely. He's worked with me. He's brought his A game every time I've asked him to. He's done stuff behind the scenes that help. Tyrus put the NWA championship on his shoulder on Fox News shows. Whether you like Fox News or not, whether you care about them, in a promotional standpoint, showing someone as a world champion of your company that's trying to gain traction, putting that world champion in front of the number of viewers that Fox News gets, that's a big boost. Now, do I think politically Billy Corgan and Tyrus have the same political views? Not necessarily, but I think this is what a lot of us need to take and think about, especially nowadays when I see there's so much this or that, so much divide between people, Democrat, Republican, whatever it may be. You can disagree with someone and not have the same views and still be friendly with them, still be friends with them, still accept that they're someone that can bring something to the table. I don't have to agree with you on who I want to be the president of the United States for me to listen to what you think of who you want to be the president of the United States. Because chances are you have a reason for that. Anyway, I digress. I'm not getting off on my soapbox here. We'll talk about more of this at the end when we go over a full overview. Tyrus has his career on the line and he's going up against EC3, which a lot of people know. Another guy that probably has been a little bit controversial with his Control Your Narrative promotion and has kind of taken a dive off of popularity, but he's still someone that carries a name. We get a little bit more of Tom Latimer here. Tyrus does end up losing to EC3, thus retiring, although Billy Corgan says that you're welcome here anytime, whether that be behind the scenes or, it's wrestling. No retirement's ever final. I thought this was another really good episode, really focused in on this NWA 75th anniversary show and giving us a backstage scene of that and a little bit of what goes into that. I'm giving this a 4. I thought it was really good. Next up, we get to the finals. The last episode, episode 8, which is called Wedding Day, and I thought this would be more of the wedding being shown here, but this was basically the first half was wedding, and the second half was a Smashing Pumpkins show the next day and a little bit of tying up loose ends. The one thing, and I forgot to mention, I forget what episode they start carrying it on, but Chloe's father is a famous fashion designer and his name is escaping me right now, and he's helped design the dress for her, and that's amazing. That's really nice that he got to do that. We get to see Billy Corgan's brothers involved here. We get to see a little bit of the wedding, which was really nice because at this point in the series, you really start caring about these two as a couple. And like I said, I'm not a person that likes these shows, the Love and Hip Hop or shows of that nature, but you can really get behind them because they seem so genuine and so nice, and they seem to work well together. They seem to have a very loving relationship, so you can't help but not cheer for them. We get more of Brian Idol talking and wanting to do more, asking Billy basically to put him on. We never get a full resolution with that, other than we start to see that there's going to be a territory system where he picks up, and if you've been following along, he has a territory in Indiana with EC3 running it. There's another one in Tennessee with the Kazana family running it, who had historically ran wrestling in the Tennessee area back in the 70s, and going back 20 years before that. Brian Idol wants to have his wrestling company be part of that, which I believe they are now, because I believe I've seen shows promoted as they're under the NWA umbrella. The one thing, or the couple things here, I thought it was another good episode. I enjoyed it, I really did. But I think we should have had, with this being the last episode, there should have been an ultimatum for Kyle. Hey, we're reducing your role, you're being fired, you're whatever. Maybe a turnaround arc where he's changed over the season. But we really didn't get that. We really got left on a what's up with Kyle kind of thing. I thought this was really good. After the wedding, which was a beautiful wedding in their backyard of their home, they turned their tea shop into an old Tower Records because 30 years prior, when they released Siamese Dream, they did an acoustic concert at Tower Records in Chicago, and they set up the tea house to look exactly like that Tower Records, which was really cool. We get to see more of the Smashing Pumpkins here, which I thought was really good. I wish, and I'll talk about this more when we go over the full overarching talk about this, I wish we got to see more of them through the season and they have more of a story going through this, because they are such a big part of Billy Corgan's life. The majority of people in the United States do not know Billy Corgan without that band. I thought this was a really good episode. I do feel more like this was the last episode of like a mid-season break instead of the last episode of a season, though. I thought it was good. I'm giving it a 4. Here are my overall thoughts on the show. I don't know if they're coming back with a second season. I haven't seen anything. I tried to look up to see if there was going to be, but there's nothing really saying that other than people saying they would like a second season. I don't know what the cost of the show or the viewership on the CW app is. I don't know that there's a lot of people that go to the CW app. So I don't know if they have the money to produce a second show, or if Billy Corgan would foot the money to produce a second season of the show. So with that, I kind of felt like there was a lot left off here. I love the relationship with Billy Corgan and his wife Chloe. They really have a wholesome thing going on there. It made me like Billy Corgan more as a person. It made me like Chloe as a person. I thought they both came off extremely nice, extremely genuine, very friendly. Learning more about the Page family, Kenzie and Kylie, I thought that was really cool. Getting to see a little bit of their backstory, I really enjoyed that of it. They're probably one of my favorite things wrestling-wise to come out of this, because I already did like them as wrestlers. Knowing more about their background makes me like them a little more. The Brian Idol stuff I thought was really good. Again, I might be biased. Like I said, he's been very friendly to me in the past. I enjoyed it. I do feel there was a time where they even said it there where he came off a little too self-important. However, I do think he's genuine and he's honest, and I think he really believes he can help, because that's the kind of person he is. When I talked to him, when I had interactions with him, he was positive. He thought he could help. Some of the things I wish they could have done better. I wish we would have had more of a payoff to the Kyle and Brian story, and I've said this several times here. Maybe Brian gets promoted, maybe they are forced to work together, and that's a resolution. I wish we seen more of Chloe. There are whole episodes on here where Chloe's basically not in the episode, or just one or two sound bites. I think if you're telling the story of Billy Corgan, and I understand the Adventures in Carnyland is mostly the NWA, but if you're telling his story, you need to tell the story of his home life a little. I wish we had more interactions with the Smashing Pumpkins, if that was a bigger part of the story, because I do believe if you're going to bring new fans to the NWA that are Smashing Pumpkins fans, you're going to want to tie in the Smashing Pumpkins a little bit more for them to keep watching episode after episode after episode. You want to see the interactions with people he's known for 30 plus years, like James Iha and Jimmy Chamberlain, who been in and out of the band ever since the band was a band. I wish they would have touched a little bit on some of the changes in the lineup, some of the things that, since they're most popular time, a lot of people, really their height of their popularity is back in the 90s, maybe the early 2000s. A lot of people may not know that Darcy Retzky has been out of the band for a while. I wish they would have touched on stuff like that, how the band has evolved, a little bit more of what it takes to be a rock star. We really didn't get much of that. We got a lot more of what it takes to be a wrestling promoter, which I'm not complaining about as a wrestling fan, but I feel like they could have balanced it out. There are wrestlers I wish they would have had more of a spotlight on. Polo Del Mar, who shows up several times in this as just like a talking head. Maxie Impaler, I would have liked to see them carve out about 5 to 10 minutes of one of the shows to explain Maxie Impaler, and maybe even have James Mitchell do the explanation if you want to keep Max in character. I wish we had more of Tyrus. Tyrus comes off really well here, really well spoken, and I feel like for people that judge him as just being the Fox News correspondent, if we would have got more of his story, maybe you could see him as a person and not just some person you hate because he has an opposing view than yours. Those are my main criticisms of the show. I do feel like it could have been a little bit longer. The episodes probably would have been better as hour-long episodes. And one of the things that really irked me about the CW app, the CW app is free, so I can't complain about that. However, each 23-minute episode has about 12 minutes of commercials, and they seem to play the same commercials over and over. I've seen the one Progressive insurance commercial at least 15 times. There's no option to buy like a premium package to remove the commercials, which adds, over the course of 8 episodes, it adds an hour and a half of watching to this. Now that may not seem like a lot over 8 episodes, and it may seem like a little bit of a petty complaint for something I'm watching for free, but how we consume television nowadays, most of us consume what we watch. Either we're watching it on streaming, or if something's on live, like let's say Monday Night Raw or Collision or any of the other things you watch, I tend to watch something like that I'll tend to start Monday Night Raw about an hour after the show starts. That way I could skip through the commercials on the DVR that I have. And I think there's a lot more people that do it that way and are more used to doing it that way. So commercials really are a little bit on the annoying side. And I know this is just a minor inconvenience, but I wish there was a way. Maybe I might have paid the extra $5 to take away the commercials, because they were annoying. I digress. That's no fault of Billy Corgan of the show. I leave this show wanting more. I want a season 2. I want more episodes. I'm going to seek out and watch this because it was enjoyable. I do think they could clean it up a bit, make it an even better show. Like I said, more of the interaction with his wife Chloe, more Smashing Pumpkin stuff, give us a little bit more explanations of wrestlers and personalities that you're working with. Jazz is someone that was introduced and we've seen her very little. A full episode dedicated to Jazz would have been awesome on her contributions to wrestling and how she's really helping the NWA women's division, which is actually a really good women's division. Overall, I'm going to give this a 4. I thought it was really enjoyable. I wouldn't say it's perfect. I do say there are things that could be improved on, but I would definitely watch this. I would definitely recommend this. I'd recommend this to people that aren't necessarily wrestling fans, that may be reality TV fans. This, to me, is better than other things I've seen, like anytime I've tried to watch anything reality-based. This comes over more genuine, more real than the reality-based shows. So I don't know, maybe it's just that I like the subject matter they're talking about here, but overall, I thought it was really good, and I would recommend you watching it if you haven't. Let me know what you think. Have you watched this? Are you planning on watching this? Is this review giving you a reason to think about watching it? Are you a Smashing Pumpkins fan? Have you been following the NWA? Let me know down here in the comments what you think. Are you genuinely someone that watches reality television? I'd like to know your opinion down here about the whole thing. With all that being said, my name is George Coles, and this has been my review of, I guess, the first season of Billy Corgan's Adventures in Carnyland.